Hey everyone, welcome to Digital Inclusion Exchange, a podcast by Digital Charlotte, a project of the Knight School of Communication at Queen's University of Charlotte. My name is Andrew Au, Director of Operation.
And my name is Bruce Clark, Executive Director of Digital Charlotte.
Angela, we've known each other for almost 4 years. Digital Charlotte has had an opportunity to collaborate with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and gain a lot of value from being part of NDIA. Even just preparing for this episode, thinking about all those things has been really remarkable. And so one of the things we were thinking about was perhaps we've heard it, but I don't know that I've ever really just asked you the question straight up. And why does NDIA exist?
Right.
And where did it start?
So I have different versions I tell of this story, depending upon how in depth I think the audience wants to go. A slight medium to slightly longer version is Carrie Coogan's predecessor at the Kansas City Public Library. She and I were talking, and the reason we were talking even is because I used to work for the University of Illinois in their iSchool doing some consulting work around gigabit libraries. And so because Google Fiber had gone to Kansas City, I was doing some interviewing in Kansas City with the Kansas City Public Library. And I was intrigued by the digital literacy work that they were doing and the stories they were telling me about Google Fiber not going into poorer neighborhoods. And so she and I became really close around all of that. And she was the one who proposed that we do an event. And that was connected to another set of circumstances going on where Lifeline was being modernized at the federal level. And I was discussing with different people the need to do a project. So I'm a consultant at this time. This would have been 2009, 2010. Is that right? No, 2015. Yeah, sorry, around 2015. And discussing with different folks the need to influence the modernization of Lifeline, because we were certain that the folks doing the policymaking were not aware of programs such as Digital Charlotte that were on the ground helping at-risk communities get access to technology, understand how to use it, have access to devices. And when I started talking, the way you start those things is you talk to a whole bunch of people and you see how they respond. Talking to a whole bunch of people, and Laura Breeden, who at the time was with NTIA but was in process of getting ready to retire, said, "Angela, why would you stop with a project? The need is way greater than just Lifeline modernization." And that kind of struck me, and I thought, well, she's totally right. This should be much bigger, because there was no voice for those on the ground efforts. And so that led to the creation of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. We had no money, so I was donating my time while I was doing consulting work still, including for the Shelby Coalition, which really helped because of the overlap in mission. The consulting work I was doing for them, and then the consulting work I did for NTIA. I helped write the broadband adoption toolkit. So doing those things right before and after and during the creation of NTIA helped increase the number of people I was talking to about these issues. And then Bill Callahan, of course, was super interested, and he donated his time also. So we both donated our time to get it started.
What was Bill doing then?
Bill was also consulting. He had run the BTOP project out of Cleveland. And so he had a regular paycheck for a while. Bill has always sometimes had a regular paycheck and sometimes not, because he is so completely devoted to the mission of digital inclusion and has been for 2 decades. And so he and I both saw what could be, and with our unique skill sets in the area and our unique network around the country. We already knew people. He and I have been doing this work. He's been doing it longer than I am. Me for about 20 years, him for 2 decades. And because we knew so many people, the national part of it seemed to flow. And at the time, and I had this good discussion with my husband because I was not bringing in a paycheck at times. So my husband had to be okay with this plan, that I really felt I was the right person at the right time. And if I didn't do it, I didn't know who was going to do it. And so
that's a really powerful statement. Sometimes timing is all part of it, right? And the fact that you had been around and in this work in a different number of different capacities and built a network and whatnot. But just sort of to take it even back, maybe two questions. I'll start with one, but even sort of coming back a little bit further, when did you sort of first get into this work yourself? Like how did you find yourself even in the world of, it might not have been called digital inclusion at the time, or maybe it was, but how did you find yourself in this space?
Yeah. I was in grad school, would have been 96.
You don't have to give up the years if you don't want. It's okay.
I don't mind. It shows I've been doing it for a really long time.
That's true.
And I was working for a professor, Randy Stoker at the University of Toledo. And he wanted to do a survey of local community-based organizations, asking how it was that the university could assist their work. And one of the primary answers that came back is technology with their constituents.
Wow.
So that's what led us on the path of what we were then calling community technology and community technology centers. So we ended up coordinating those efforts, and we called it CATNET, Coalition to Access Technology and Networking in Toledo. And it does not exist anymore, sadly. But that's what led me to, I was setting up computer labs. I was coordinating those efforts. I was working with those who were teaching technology. Sometimes I was teaching the classes, primarily in some low-income housing. And then when I left Toledo and moved to Columbus, I had a job I wasn't very happy with, and just got a call from that same professor, Randy Stoker, saying the Ohio Community Computing Network executive director had decided she wanted to go back to school to be a teacher, and the job was open and I should apply.
Wow, nice.
And I did, and I was stunned I got it because I'm pretty much fresh out of grad school at that point. Like, what do I know? But it turned out I had this unique knowledge about community technology centers, and then getting involved in being the director of the OCCN, and then ultimately getting involved nationally. I ended up being the board president of what was then Community Technology Centers Network, CTC. Does not exist anymore. If it did, we wouldn't have needed NDIA.
So a sort of a, you, Andrew, and I have probably more recently started to ask each other this question, thinking about our work and thinking about the why behind it, and beyond the sort of traditional things of like the fact that we are fortunate enough to have jobs in this space, which align also to our personal passions. But the for you, talk to us about that personal passion. Like, what is it beyond the fact that you saw yourself in this space or were in this space and saw the opportunity? Like for you personally, for Angela, why is the work of digital inclusion so important, as it was when you're telling the story from back in the late 90s to even today? What do you think is the intrinsic motivator in you to be engaged in this work?
I think I just see the power of the technology, that it is this incredible tool, and I enjoy that tool myself. And so because I have seen the power of that, so I have not always been able to do this work and get paid for it. And sometimes I've had to go do other work. One needs to pay one's bills. And at one point, I got laid off from a startup because the startup closed. And the way I was able to survive is because the thing they let me keep was my computer. I got 2 weeks notice on my computer. And because I had a computer, I started my own business teaching people how to use social media. And that's what allowed me to survive, allowed me to only be on unemployment for a few months.
Wow.
So this is a very powerful tool, this device.
So this might be a very obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because I feel like it is very important to ask that. How did you feel your digital literacy level was at the time when all you had left was your computer? So do you feel like if you just received the computer but you actually didn't know how to use it, would it just be a paperweight right now?
Yeah. So I think it was my confidence level, maybe overconfident.
That's not bad.
And my network. I had people around me that I could turn to for help. So I spent a lot of time creating my own website for the company and coming up with, I was doing a lot of social media myself. I was networking via social media. I was doing blogs and that type of thing. But I had people I could turn to, colleagues and friends for help. And I think if I hadn't had colleagues and friends I could turn to for help, none of that would have been possible.
I think that's a really important point for people who are engaged in this work, but oftentimes it's for people who I think we're trying to convince or who are on the periphery or even further out, that the work of digital inclusion can oftentimes on paper seem like very hardware, very just the skill transfer. Like, I need you to learn how to type on this computer. I need you to learn the skill. But what we oftentimes see, what we oftentimes see on the ground is that social capital combined with the technical skills and being digitally included is really what's necessary. So we talk oftentimes, right, about the three-legged stool, internet access, affordable internet access in the home, affordable technology, computer, a desktop or laptop, and digital literacy skills. And if there was a fourth leg to sort of riff a little bit, I would add that social capital piece, because you can still have all those things, but to your point, it's that human network that allows you to leverage the digital network and vice versa, right?
Yes.
I think that's a fantastic point and a good segue to thinking about networks,
right?
And the people. Could you talk to us about who does NDIA serve, and then perhaps even in that context, who are NDIA's members serving?
Yeah, right. So that is an important distinction. So NDIA doesn't teach people how to use the internet. We don't get them the access to that technology. We support the organizations who do that work. And the organizations who do that work tend to be community-based nonprofits, libraries, housing authorities, local governments, etc. It is a very grassroots, organic ecosystem that has developed at that local level. We don't direct their work. We have no involvement financially or programmatically, but what we have been able to do is spread best practices and spread identification of barriers in order to support their work. I would say one way we have influenced that local work is through those organizations that were previously only teaching digital literacy. Some of them now also help the folks that they serve get access to or understand the options for a discounted internet service, or have now partnered with some discount device providers. So that whole idea of the three-legged stool, maybe it's not even that they provide those services themselves, but they have found the partners in order to holistically address the challenge, the problem, not just one piece.
To perhaps illustrate some of those partners who are, could you sort of talk about maybe specifically who some of those partners are? And I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, and there's lots of amazing organizations that are involved in NDIA. So, if you happen to be one of those and you don't get mentioned here, we're thinking about you in our hearts and in our minds. So, not to pick favorites, but just could you sort of share to help people understand the types of organizations who are involved in this work?
Yeah. So a good locality for me to talk about is Kansas City, because I did start out doing so much work with them. The joke always is that I know more about what's going, not really a joke, it's quite sad. I know more about what's going on in Kansas City than I know in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I live. The ecosystem there is strong. They know who the different partners are. They they meet monthly. The Kansas City Public Library has the digital literacy trainings. They have, at one point, they were doing a hotspot program with the school system. They have Connecting for Good. So there's only a handful of 501c3s in the United States whose mission is digital inclusion, whose mission is equitable access to technology. Most digital inclusion programming occurs within a larger mission and purpose.
Right. Like us here at university having the opportunity to do this work, we're part of a school of communication, the Knight School of Communication at Queen's University, but there's other things going on, although we're focused on this work, but yeah.
Exactly.
Although, see, I would put you guys in that unique category because you're, as an agency or as a department of the university, you do totally focus on it, but there's not very many organizations like Digital Charlotte. So Kansas City is one of those rare places, but they also have the city involved, and they have partnerships with schools, and they have other nonprofits that are involved, and they have academic partners. They hold these monthly meetings that 50, 60 people come in. The library doesn't even provide coffee for those meetings.
That's a big deal. Wow.
That's like
that's a place to call then.
Yeah. Wow.
True dedication.
Yeah. Okay. So do they have, we talked about the library and the city. Do they have any, thinking about business here? I mean, obviously there's some interesting roles for them to play in this work. Do you have any examples of companies that are playing in this space?
Yeah. So in San Antonio, they have they call it DIASA, Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio. They have a pretty good name.
Yes.
DIASA, their current chair works for a broadband company. So that it's not a traditional ISP. It's a company that gets hired by often local governments to lay fiber and set up networks. And so he is the chair of that entity.
Some other great examples out of San Antonio that I don't know that we've mentioned yet, the role that housing authorities play in this work, in part because of the constituencies that they serve. But oftentimes, I know that when we're thinking about partnering here with our housing authority, we oftentimes look to the fantastic work that's happening in San Antonio as a sort of a bellwether to that.
I had a question, and I feel like my role today might be to ask the question for the person who doesn't know. But what is a three-legged stool?
Oh, right. So it's the phrase that often gets used, and sometimes it even becomes a table. Just to add confusion. It is the access to the device, the access to the internet, and the digital literacy training. The way it goes from a stool to a table is that tech support, which could also be defined as that social capital that we talked about earlier. PCs for People, I've always been amazed. They are a nonprofit out of the Twin Cities that's now doing work nationally. They have, within their programming, whether or not you bought the computer from them, you can come in and get it fixed for $25 flat fee, no matter what the price of the parts are. And it doesn't matter if you bought it from them, but you're going to walk out with something that works.
Wow. That's fantastic.
That's the fourth leg.
Well, and I think, when we think about why a stool, like what does that mean? And just to go back to your question of somebody who's new to this conversation, right? The concept being that, you need 3 points to make the stool stand up. And oftentimes I add this layer to it, is it's not just the stool is used for people to stand on, to reach up to the next level of opportunity they're trying to create in their life, right? And so without a foundation that's stable, especially in our modern society, economy, and democracy, it's nearly, and I think we're sort of all on the same page, at least in the context of the three of us, that it's nearly impossible to thrive today without having all three of those things, or make it a table so it's even more sturdy, which I love the idea of comparing tech support to social capital, because that's really, I mean, there's a technical skill on the other side, but it's knowing where to go, having a face. You're going to have to do some presumably face-to-face interactions there, and knowing where to go and having a relationship.
Right.
With those
even
people.
if you don't know, even the person you go to doesn't know how to do the tech support, they still could potentially know who to reference or refer you to find that tech support.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the point of it being foundational. I think we're finding increased awareness that efforts that are very well intentioned, that jump right to like a coding class or skills development, where they haven't taken into account that people don't have internet at home.
Yes.
That confidence level and comfort level isn't there.
Yes.
They have grown up with a smartphone, but they didn't grow up with a computer. And it's a different skills and different sense of, I can figure this out.
Yes. Yes. We don't, this is sort of a little bit off script, but I think you just make an excellent point, because oftentimes, and this goes to perhaps a challenge with the investment being made in things like STEM, or specifically in coding and whatnot, in part because it can be driven by industry who has deeper pockets, where we go into community or we talk with city officials or county officials or government officials who oftentimes are really quick at using that language, because those organizations have money to invest in delivering that message. And they're all trying to serve, or so I should say, we're all trying to serve a very similar population, but the difference being that we understand that there is still a gap or a divide, using our own language, right? There's still a digital divide that needs to be crossed before one can become a coder or whatever it is that they're looking for. And so I just saw a tweet yesterday that said that, like, before you go to coding school, you have to know how to turn on a computer. You have to know how to operate a mouse. And we do work in the community all the time where we're amongst really smart people in our community who just haven't had the opportunity to learn those skills yet. And so, once they do learn those skills, now they're better prepared to succeed at those programs. It's not just about entering those programs, it's about completing those programs and creating new opportunity in one's life, right? Not just checking the box.
Right.
So that one got me fired up. I think that's a really important distinction. So actually, speaking of opportunity, where do you see the greatest opportunity for increased impact, specifically in the context of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance?
Yeah, I think the impact we've had already is the awareness.
Mm-hmm.
We have people using the term digital inclusion now. It's our definition for digital inclusion is being used by federal agencies, academics. We've now started tracking. We're over a dozen academic publications now that have used our definition.
Alexa as well. We know if you ask Alexa, make sure if you're listening and you have an Alexa nearby, ask Alexa, what is digital inclusion? You will likely hear the NDIA's definition. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Angela.
I was very amused when you sent that to me, because I do not have an Alexa and did not know that was happening. That was heartwarming. So I think the impact now is, now that we have built that, and we're still building that awareness, there is still this great misunderstanding that people already have access to the internet because they're carrying around a mobile phone. If there isn't significant data on that phone, it is not access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the next impact is funding. That is what we were really striving for at the federal level, is federal funding, funding that will come from philanthropy and industry, because it impacts the folks that they serve having access to the internet and understanding how to use it impacts their bottom lines.
Mm.
So going at the funding issue is not only a philanthropic endeavor, but as a good business decision.
Mm. Could you expand on that? Funding for what?
Oh, right. So the digital inclusion programming in the United States is very hard to get funding for.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason there are only a handful of organizations focused entirely on digital inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
If one asks them where their funding comes from, it is often for things kind of related to digital inclusion, but not directly for digital inclusion. So organizations often don't receive funding because they're teaching people how to use the internet, because they're getting them access to the internet. That in itself is not fundable. There's not an understanding of the value of that. So instead, they get funding because they're doing work they're helping folks get jobs, or they're training them for jobs. They're helping folks get access to health information and healthcare, which, yes, those impacts are really important. But say you're training someone in order to get access to a job, and it turns out they then interact with their ill parent in another city more, and that parent then is taking their medicine more regularly and has more connectedness and is doing better, but you're not really tracking that. You were tracking whether or not they got a job.
Yep. The intersectionality of this issue, I think this is oftentimes the line. I just had a conversation yesterday about this, that the work of digital inclusion and our goal of achieving digital equity is intersectional with almost speaking in the context of our region, and we're sitting here in Charlotte, that it intersects with all of these other community issues, even with things like food deserts and opportunity deserts and healthcare deserts and whatnot. Yeah, you're definitely speaking our language.
And it's a poverty issue. We also know populations such as those with some disabilities are kept from full use of the internet. So getting to solutions for every population that has those barriers, it's something that you have to look at all the other barriers going on in their lives, not just the technological one.
Speaking of technology, I think we just got a screenshot. I don't know if that'll show up in the audio, but Andrew,
it'll be fine.
You'll be fine. It's okay. We took a screenshot. It was a good picture. I don't know. Andrew's feeling good over there. So, speaking of feeling good, as I sort of started at the beginning talking about it and really meaning this, that for me personally, NDIA has been a guidepost that has really helped. I think from a social capital perspective, one, knowing that there's other people, when oftentimes here in our community, especially 4 years ago, not everybody was understanding what we were talking about or feeling that we were getting the support we needed. So there was definitely a level of knowing that there's a community of folks across the country who are working on this, who even though they weren't right here next to me, I could sort of feel their presence through the work of NDIA. But Angela, what would you say are some of the biggest successes that you and NDIA have had so far?
I think one of our biggest successes is that community. So NDIA is not the staff. NDIA is the community. And the community is both the affiliates, whom we define as the local organizations, such as Digital Charlotte, doing digital inclusion work on the ground. But that community has grown beyond those local affiliates. We now have national public interest organizations, for example, that are participating in that community. And the listserv, of all things, right, this simple technical solution, a listserv, is one of the greatest values we have brought to the community.
Yes.
And it doesn't cost us anything.
Yep. How do you get on the listserv?
Yeah. Oh, good question.
No, how do you get on the listserv?
How does somebody get on the listserv?
The listserv, I thought you said you have a listserv.
Oh, no.
Wait, you do? Actually, how do you get on it? That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. So you get on the listserv by going to the website, digitalinclusion.org, and clicking on Get Involved. And you can either become an affiliate, if that is appropriate for your organization, or you can become a friend. Either route will take you, will get you access to the listserv.
I did not know about the friend part.
The friend, the distinction between affiliate and a friend.
So an affiliate gets you listed on the website as a digital inclusion program. And then organizations can find you. And people do use our map, and there's a easy table to filter if you're looking for particular digital inclusion programs, which does get used by others, media and such. Looking for programming, looking for partners, because it is hard to find other digital inclusion programs because they're not called digital inclusion programs often on the ground. It's called community computing or computer classes or a variety of things.
And does it cost a fee to be an affiliate or a friend?
No, it does not. NDIA very much recognizes that if we put a cost on it, that would create a barrier we don't want.
Sure.
So no cost to join. We have another system set up for organizations to become what we call subscribers. So they're subscribing to be part of a group. It's a sliding scale based upon their annual revenues. And that gets folks into a monthly phone call where I and others update and have a conversation about what's going on around the country, things that are easier to talk about rather than put into emails for the listserv.
Well, and one of those, just speaking from my own experience, being a subscriber, is the policy conversation, especially when you're on the ground doing the work. Our organization, more focused in the sort of on the ground in the community, also thinking about what role we play in sort of the policy, both locally and also regionally. But the calls are really helpful for having that moment in time where you can sort of get the cliff notes of what's going on, and then when you need to lean in or when you hear something that's really valuable. So becoming a subscriber, this is sort of like maybe a break. I feel like I'm doing an ad for NDIA here, but I would actually be gladly do that. Becoming a subscriber, really, the value is really there. And for me, that's one of the ways that at least we've seen value from that.
And NDIA, then the staff in particular learn from our affiliates when we're out doing things, like when we did, we're coming to Charlotte for the conference, but then preparing for that conference, I'm spending time with you guys and spending time with the other digital inclusion partners in Charlotte. And that influences the work that we do. Those subscriber calls influence the work that we do, because we're super cautious that what we're doing is based upon your real experiences and other digital inclusion programs, real experiences on the ground. So that, we're constantly reminding ourselves, okay, is this other thing that we want to do, is it going to benefit the affiliates on the ground? If it's not, we shouldn't be spending our time on it.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic model. We appreciate that. So we're here recording this. We've got this sort of our podcast set up. We have cameras on. We've got Angela here. We've got this really, hopefully it looks really fancy setup going on if you're watching the video or listening to just the audio. But part of the reason we're here is because of a new partnership that we're forming, and so to continue to bring content like this to our audience and to a broader audience of both those who are engaged in this work plus folks who are new to this space, a conversation around digital inclusion and digital equity and all of the terms that kind of get used in this space. And so, Angela, maybe do you want to share a little bit about what it is that we're hoping to do with this new partnership?
Yes.
As much as you can share today.
Yeah. So Caitlin Schwartz is our operations manager, and she and I learned just how hard it is to put together a podcast. So we are very excited to be partnering with Digital Charlotte on these podcasts. And the idea being that there's so much knowledge on the ground, and a podcast series is another means of sharing that knowledge. NDIA has that listserv. We have our website where we have a variety of resources. We have an annual conference every year. Of course, it's an annual conference every year. But we can use another way of sharing that local expertise with each other. When we first started NDIA at the very first conference, we had a pre-event discussion for a particular project that I was working on. And we asked folks in the room who's been working on, access to information communication technology for 2 years, 5 years. We kept going. We got up to like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And I was like, and by the time we got 20 years, there were like 10 people that raised their hands.
Wow.
I was like, my God, we're just now having a conference? That's insane. And somebody in the front row said, we've been waiting for you.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And
That's really
it
awesome.
was incredibly heartwarming. And that need to learn from each other, that need to have a peer. If you're in some places, you may not know who else is doing the work. You might be the only person who really understands. Like there might be people teaching digital literacy, but nobody else is working on the home access piece. So you might feel like you're a little bit alone. And so that you get into this national community and you're not alone anymore.
Well, that's a great, I mean, I feel the passion in your voice, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're excited to partner with you on this. And Digital Charlotte is housed inside of the Knight School of Communication. We're here in part because of an endowment received from the Knight Foundation, which has also been generous supporters in other digital inclusion activity, and definitely engage in some smart cities work as well, helping create more informed and engaged communities. And so, we have this sort of blend of interest in digital inclusion and our expertise there, but also we're here in a school of communication, and so we have access to this nice podcasting setup and cameras and things that make us a great
tools.
partner. And then obviously the incredible network that you bring, the access to the partners. So I'm really looking forward to some of the conversations that the three of us are going to have with some guests in some upcoming episodes. But maybe just sort of thinking about that passion one last time, because you are clearly so passionate about this work, and sort of a really simple question, but yet probably somewhat hard is why. And perhaps we talked about this a little before, but now that we're here,
Well, why
are you so passionate about this, Angela?
I don't know if I have a clear answer for that. Sometimes things just are, right? And I think it just is. I see the incredible power of technology, and I've also seen the heartbreaking aspects of it. I think as I do this work, I learn some of those stories, and they impact me deeply because of the personal connection. So I have 3 children. One of them ended up, it was like a semester and a half of college credit that he got because of the AP classes that he took during high school. And one of the stories I heard, there was a school in Virginia that was getting into the issue of technology access and did some focus groups. And they learned through those focus groups, some of the kids told them that there were kids not taking AP classes because those AP classes required online homework. So I think about the money lost of those families because the kids didn't take the AP classes. And so often the stories I hear, there's a personal connection like that one.
Maybe to ask you the same question, Andrew. Well, I know you're also passionate about this, and we're here in this, and just kind of putting you on the spot.
Let's do it.
What's your why, Andrew?
Well, my why is essentially my work history. Well, actually, I would say just my history of how I interact with community and people around me has always been somewhat serving others and serving those that are more disadvantaged than myself. And I would say that I have a unique gift, nerdiness towards computers and technology, and it just ended up that specifically here and how I got to Digital Charlotte is just that this need, this heart, this want and desire to serve the disadvantaged, but also using I wouldn't say gifting, just using a unique skill set that I had acquired over, I would say, since middle school on, of just being involved in technology and wanting to explore more about computers and everything else that technology touches now. Just put me in this really unique position with this unique skill set, with this unique why of wanting to help the community surrounding me with technology, but specifically the community that might be not first of interest of just the other people and just those that might be disadvantaged or underserved.
I suspect quite a few of NDIA affiliates feel the same.
Yeah.
That they recognize the value of the technology and they enjoy it even.
Yep.
They have this unique skill set and want to share that.
I'm going to flip it on you, Bruce. What's your why?
Well, I'm glad you both went first because it gave me a second to think about it. No, I don't really need to think about it. I think it's this idea of connectedness, right? I think, as a young person, I felt it, social capital, like I felt the connection to people, but also beyond just the people I was immediately connected with. So I often would feel comfortable in rooms where I didn't know anybody, even as a young child, which I think is sometimes unique. Whereas other people might feel strangers or view people as strangers. I often felt connected to people and not necessarily knowing why. And growing up in, as a Gen Xer really, and sort of where technology wasn't present in the beginning, but became present. I had a moment where I was a freshman in high school, and I stumbled into a room, probably up to no good, but stumbled into like a storage closet in my high school. And I remember opening the door and, dating myself here, but there's just stacks of Apple IIes and the green screen, all that fun stuff. And I was just, it was probably the first moment I thought about the digital divide, but didn't have the language. And subsequently had an experience shortly after participating in Model United Nations, and I represented a country, and I was in an economic group, and we were talking about what could we do. And I remember basically technology refurbishing was the idea, right? And this is like years ago, before I even knew what the heck I was talking about, and I barely know today. But and it was about the realization that we still connect in a social way. But more and more, we're also connecting in a digital way, and knowing that many parts of our community are not able to connect in that way, which makes us globally less connected. And to me, that it creates a whole bunch of other challenges. Information today is consumed and confined in some cases to technology, and because information is so powerful, I'm a passionate advocate for ensuring that everybody has access to it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me in terms of just knowing the availability of information, the frequency that information gets distributed online, and just needing the tools in order to even have that, the information at your literal fingertips. You need to have the table, essentially.